I'm so grateful for this event because I love talking the science. And I always have an effort to understand it and learn it. And so every time I prepare for a presentation or talked with Darren, I always have a much deeper understanding, and Scott also. So I'm very grateful to be here today. So my name is Margaret Ruhe, and I did live and work with Lau Russell for 10 years. This would have been from 1977 through to her refolding, which, if I remember correctly, was 1988. She refolded, and then I stayed on one more year beyond that. But it was a very valuable experience because so often modern science will say that and everything is like flowing downhill. If you were in Leo's presence, even at her age, and of course I never knew her age while she was alive, she never disclosed that, but she was a live wire, tremendously polarized her whole life, walking around the mountain, vigorously, even a week before her refolding. So definitely very polarized. And so even though she was up in years, she had a very polarized energy and always hugely vibrant. And so her refolding, of course, was a shock to me, really, because she expressed life and energy. Now, I had a father that was very committed to science. He was an engineer, and he used to, if I could advance this. Oh, okay, so sorry. My father was a engineer, and he designed steam generators for the nuclear industry in Canada for the CANDU reactors. So it was myself and 4 siblings. He was always coming home with magnets, everything from Edmund Scientific. So it spurred my curiosity in science. And so I was always curious. When I was with Lau Russell at Swannanoa, it was all work. And the work, of course, is, again, an expression of the philosophy. And when I left and I was in the workaday world, my hobbies was always like toward the science. And so at one time, I even put a water fuel cell on a project car. It was a Nissan Maximum 1999. And water gas is something that fascinated me when I first learned of it, because it surprises me even to this day that it isn't better understood or even used in industry the way that it could be. So I put a water fuel cell on my Nissan Maximum, and it was a very sophisticated kit. And I have the actual cell here, so if anybody wants to look at it, it's quite heavy, and the design of it is quite interesting. And it used a resonant principle in order to separate the hydrogen and oxygen in the water. And so it was this monatomic hydrogen and oxygen was sent into the engine, and it increased the power of the burn. And when I bought the project car, I didn't realize it was a California car. And a California car has 3 oxygen sensors. And when something burns too cleanly, the computer on the car says something's wrong. We've got to put more fuel in. And so if I had had a car that wasn't a California car, I would have been more successful. But the computer modules in modern cars today is probably near impossible to override the programming. But if I were to do it again, I would do it with a jalopy, maybe an old carburetor style. And I would love to do that now that I am near retirement. that's something that I might take on. But it was a very excellent learning curve for me. And so, again, water gas is one of the topics I'll speak of today, and then also the Crom Ray converter, and then the Liberty Engine project. The GEET Engine, I was friends with an engineer in North Carolina, and I got him inspired on all these things. And when he learned of the GEET Engine, he just had to build one. So he built one. I shared the specs with him, and he was able to run his lawnmower on half gas and half water. And then he wanted to go even further, and he wanted to try and put one of these water fuel cells in line with it, just to see what would happen. And he put the water fuel cell in a bubbler, which you have to have. You have to have some kind of a backflash protection. Then he had a second bubbler as a second protection. And he fired it up, and it ran, and then boom. We were in his basement, and I swear I think I almost lost my hearing because it was so powerful. I mean, it makes you realize the power of hydrogen gas. So that kind of demolished his build. So, but it was, again, a learning experience, because the GEET engine, you can always YouTube it. It was a very interesting design because the intake was run through the exhaust. So it was a preheated fuel, and then it was also ran against a rod. So it forced a larger volume into a smaller volume, and it was magnetized. So the theory was that it was producing plasma that went into the engine, so a very clean burn. I also went to a Bedini workshop, and then together we bought a kit for a magnet motor. And again, another learning experience on this permanent magnet motor build. If you put it under load, it ran quicker. So that's fascinating because, again, it's contrary to what modern science will tell you. So these are my favorite concepts. When Michaela put the program together, she asked each of us, what are your favorite concepts of the Russell science? And definitely the power in the fulcrum. That's so fascinating to me because the fulcrum is the stillness. So you wouldn't think that stillness would be powerful. And stillness is overlooked in modern science. But the power is in the fulcrum, and then the expression is in motion. And then nature, if you upset the stillness, nature, or God, wants to balance it. It seeks equilibrium. So if you upset the balance, it wants to come back to equilibrium. So there'll be an opposite reaction to try and bring you back to stillness. So if you can upset the balance and then harness the multiplied reaction is, I think, a key. And then the other idea, and this is in Walter Russell's diagrams, as it's seeking balance, keep it a little off kilter so that it's always seeking balance. So it's continually operating, continually running. And then a few other concepts here. Elements are not substances, but different conditions of light and space. Leah Russell, in her illumination, she was told, "Thou shalt know space, but never emptiness." So in other words, matter and space are, I guess, two poles, you would say. And they're of equal potential, but remarkably different volumes. So if you understand space, then you can understand more how to govern the elements. And then, of course, coming back to water, Walter Russell states in his little book, Space and the Hydrogen Age, our oceans are inexhaustible storehouses of voided oxygen, which can be regenerated to active oxygen. And then another key in his statement, science has never suspected the spatial relation of hydrogen to nitrogen. When this spatial relation is known, it will have so great an effect upon the world that a new chemistry will be ushered in. And in my workings with the water fuel cell, I met a gentleman. He managed to put one on a generator. And he was able to get a sustained, consistent burn. And he told me that he brought in air and a little bit of water vapor, but the content of the nitrogen in the air is likely what gave it a lot of stability. And so these are the three topics. Water, gas. I don't know if any of you are aware, but Professor Yul Brown, he was a Bulgarian inventor and scientist. He'd had a very rough beginning. It was during the war. He was in a prison camp. He was thought to be a spy. So he had a very difficult upbringing. He managed to flee to Australia, and he went to a university, studied electromagnetism. He had his own lab there. And he's often credited with the discovery of water gas. He did a lot to promote it. And it is mysterious because water gas is not explosive, but rather implosive. So when you create water gas, you have monatomic hydrogen and oxygen. When you bring it back together, it goes back to water, so it's an implosion. And surprisingly, it burns coal. I have a video, and you'll see what I mean by this. And another interesting part of water gas, especially in welding or in machinery, if you take two dissimilar metals and then place the water gas at that seam, the water gas will meet the melting temperature of each of the dissimilar metals and create a beautiful seam. So the water gas is, I guess you would say, intelligent. It knows what it's marrying to and will melt both metals simultaneously. So there's no slag. It's a very clean burn. And these are some of the applications, but let me show you this video first, and this is Yul Brown.
Tonight he reports on Brown's gas.
Well, put your thinking caps on, because for most of us, the technical reasons why Brown's gas works are mighty complicated to understand. So we're going to break it down a little bit. Brown's gas begins with water, ends with water. Pretty simple. When it produces a flame, it does so not through explosions like fossil fuel, but through implosions. And here's a definition for a word you'll tossed around. When something is sublimated, in this case, it means it's being directly changed from a solid to a gas. So here goes.
What the professor has done is taking ordinary tap water, separated it into two atomic components, hydrogen and oxygen, and now we have a clean burning fuel that's renewable and reusable, and when you burn it, it goes right back to water. This is a piece of pure tungsten steel, 100% pure tungsten steel, and it takes 6,000 degrees centigrade, close to 5960 to sublimate, which should take approximately 10 times more than what it takes to weld aluminum. Without any adjustment of this flame, I'm holding my finger there, we can sublimate tungsten steel instantly, go right back to gas.
Brown's fuel is also different because the temperature of its flame varies depending on what it's burning. The scientists say the flame temperature is due to an interactive combustion property.
The heat is produced by the material. The tougher the material, the hotter the flame gets or the reaction is.
So what does all this mean? What exactly could Brown's fuel actually do for us?
In the future, with this technology, we will be able to run cars and power plants with clean burning water as a fuel source. And since the earth is covered with 2/3 water, we will no longer have an energy crisis in this country or in the world, and we'll clean up the environment in the process.
Using this process, we're talking about a very, very small amount of energy. Professor, could you come over here for a minute? And we don't know because of the
that's
lack
good. Thank you.
of data and research that's been done.
This is
Let
actually
me
Will
ask you a
Brown
question.
here,
If
and
we took
so I got the
one
clips interchanged, but
liter
it essentially
water.
shows you enough of what I mean. Water is meeting the tungsten electrode rod at the 5960 degrees in order to sublimate it. So now in my understanding of ultra-Russell science, I would say, well, maybe what's happening is the hydrogen is allowing the tungsten to go back to zero, or perhaps to the inert gas. I'm not really understanding of the principle, and maybe that's something Darren could speak to perhaps in the Q&A section. But the applications of it are, of course, obvious, and especially when it comes to running engines. I think if you can use water as a fuel, it would be amazing. I do think that this, unfortunately, has been suppressed because obviously it would put a dent into the oil and gas industry. But Yul Brown was even able to neutralize cobalt-60, a radioactive material, and it was demonstrated in front of the U.S. Department of Energy. And then California Health and Human Services was brought in. They were concerned that, he neutralized cobalt-60, the Geiger counter went down. I forget the actual measurements, but I have a printout here I'm happy to share with anybody. But Health and Human Services came to look at the environment afterwards, and it was totally clean. So he was able to neutralize it, and it was with water gas. So that's going to be a key for us. Now, the mechanism of how it works, I can't really explain it, unfortunately. There is a company in Italy that actually manufactures welding units for industry. And this is the only vendor I could find. Yul Brown did most of his work in Australia, but China asked him to come. And so much of these instruments were manufactured in China. And toward the end of his life, Yul Brown was also invited back to China to work on producing clean-burning engines with this water fuel. But Yul Brown got weak. He had to return to Australia, and he refolded in 1998 at the age of 76. But this company is actually going to be in Las Vegas in June this year to demonstrate the units. Yeah, that's it. Be manufactured. So yeah, and actually that shows you enough, but if you'll notice in the first cell, the water gas was initiated, and then it was sent through a bubbler and then into the carburetor. And this was of a generator. They did a nice, sophisticated redo of the water cell, and I have a lot of confidence in what they're doing. All right, that's enough. Thank you. But all of this, is on YouTube now, although it might be censored out at some point. You never know. There's a lot of inventors I had followed years ago, and I went looking for them, and they're all gone. So YouTube will censor out certain materials, unfortunately. Okay, so Walter Russell anticipated the use of hydrogen as our next world fuel. Now, he spoke of another method of extracting hydrogen from both air and water, and he discloses it in his new concept of the universe. And so that's something that everybody should study and read. Now, the second invention I've been fascinated with was built by John Bedini. He took a patent, and you'll see the patent number here, if you can see it down below, dated in the 1960s, 1968. But he perfected the patent. The original patent holder had died, and so he got permission from the gentleman's wife. And so John Bedini perfected it, and it's called the Crom Ray converter, or he often referred to it as a gravity field generator. And he claimed that it could be as efficient as 180 to 350%. Now, the use of it, in my theory, is that you could charge a whole bank of batteries very easily and quickly, or even a Tesla Powerwall. I think what it's doing is it's harnessing the, I guess if you want to call it negative electricity, or maybe the cold electricity. And so the unit actually runs cold, so it's very safe. And I can't show you a video clip of it, but I can show you a few diagrams of it. This is the basic design. So you had two powerful magnets on either side. And then this core is a rotating core, and the coils were in the bars. So you'll see the coils in each of the bars, and then it was rotating. He just used a regular small motor in order to perform the rotation. And then what was extracted from the coils came out into the leads. And then when John Bedini, I have this DVD at home, and I wasn't able to extract video clips from it, but John Bedini said that, and he called it a blotch wall. In magnetics, the zero is often referred to as a blotch wall. So the blotch wall is between the north and south on either side. And then the shaft, he emphasized, had to be of a non-magnetic material. So in this way, you could create two more blotch walls, or two more gravity shafts, top and bottom, between each of the two coils. So he described it as energy shooting in, and it's being pumped. So it's being pumped from top and bottom and pumped from either side. And so this was the magic. So in other words, the gravity shafts, or in Walter Russell's term, that's again the stillness shaft was being brought in. And then as it runs, if you stop, the actual coil, now you'll see a picture of the coil at the base, and the coil base is very hot to the touch after it runs, but the unit blows cold air. So it does not need any special coolant. And there's a similar coil at the very top as well. So he did manufacture 1,000 units. The last 12 was purchased by MIT. And then there was a larger version that was bought to run a wind farm. But again, anytime you come up with something, sometimes there's always an element that is disruptive. And he felt that it was a gentleman that worked for one of the government agencies that kind of put a kibosh on his manufacturing. He had a third-party manufacturer, and somehow that manufacturer quit. So, and then this is interesting because these are the output leads. So in other words, he could touch both leads, and it was totally safe. And yet it put out a tremendous, it must have been a high voltage, low amperage, I'm guessing. But he could touch the leads. And then when he fed the leads into this battery to charge it, it sped up. And then he could also take the leads and put it back to the originating battery. But you could put a bunch of batteries in series and very quickly energize all of these batteries. And the battery gets cold, so that's interesting too. And then he was told by this government agent that it made its way on one of the NASA probes, but he didn't know which one. And then this one I've been following just recently in the last 4 months or so. It's called the GEET Engine project. I think it is similar in principle to the Crom Ray converter, but it is more sophisticated. And they do emphasize also a non-magnetic core. And again, it's a core with spinning magnets. And the core, they don't disclose the content of the core totally. They just give a hint that it's largely silver with some aluminum. But they actually put neodymium magnets here, if you could. You'll see them on each of the poles. You've got a north-north and then a south-south is the way the magnets are configured. And he has microwave transformers. They salvage these from old microwaves. You'll see the coils on either side, and then they're also top to bottom. And this shows you they were particular in how they position the coils that they salvaged from microwaves. They call it the microwave transformer, so it's a step-up coil. So they were particular to make sure that the left and right were in series, and then the top and bottom were in series. And then this is a better picture of the core where you'll see the neodymium magnets. So they point it north on this side, north, and then south and south. So, and then you'll see how the transformer are wired here. They bring the top and bottom in together, and then either side in together. And then each of those go to a power strip. And then they have a pull start. And so this is what actually will break the stillness. So again, you break the stillness so it wants to come back to equilibrium. And it causes the microwave coils to be energized by the neodymium magnets. And I'll show you a quick clip. So in other words, it does run at a very high RPM, and they claim that it will generate 20,000 watts. Each microwave transformer coil, I think, is rated at 3,000 watts each. But there is, I guess, a multiplication happening. And then the key with the core, it's non-magnetic, so they claim that there's 0 eddies, no magnetic braking. So it's frictionless, they claim. And this gives you a picture. So this motor is actually plugged right back into the unit. So it's a standalone unit. And this is an electrical diagram. Again, this is all available online. And there are a number of people trying to build it. And if you read the comments, half of them think it's a sham. The other half think, this is amazing, let me build one. And they're trying to build it, but because of patent infringement, this GEET Engine project group, they will not disclose the makeup of the core, because they said if they were to do that, they would be subject to lawsuits, because it's a so-called trademark secret, which lasts for a long, long time. And so it disallows them from disclosing that. But I think what they're doing in the open source environment is they're encouraging a lot of people to try, and maybe there's a different makeup of the core that would work equally well for that. Yeah, so it's a standalone. So it is a standalone unit, and obviously this could play a big role in anybody wanting to live off-grid. And then, of course, you probably could step up the design. And then I think with Darren's knowledge, if the coils were designed differently too, because these are cylindrical coils, they're not conical coils, then it could probably be stepped up even further. But I know Darren has, much better projects. But this just gives, for me, it just gives me a demonstration of how the stillness is divided. And then there is I think a resonant reaction. It's resonant multiplied reaction that creates the energy that can be extracted. So that's what fascinates me the most. This is a little bit of detail that they do disclose about the core. So it is largely silver based on the weight. It's going to be predominantly silver, some aluminum, but they say a few other metals are in there as well. If you could advance one for me. Yeah, these are just a few more diagrams of a test. I won't show that now, but you'll see the outlet strips, and then they have the meters. So they have the 4 heaters running, and each of the outlet strips are running at about 300 or 3,000 volts, I guess it is. And the motor itself is consuming, or it's still generating 228 volts. And at 50 hertz, this is the motor. And then the motor is consuming, they unplugged one of the heaters, they plugged in the motor, and it shows 74 volts. So the motor consumes 74 watts, sorry. The motor consumes 74 watts, and as well as run all 4 heaters. So, and then this is just an overall question. You know, magnets are not easy to produce in industry. But if you had the power of water gas, maybe it could be made cleaner. But magnets, once you condition a magnet, a permanent magnet, I believe, is considered good for 99 years. So if you were to produce magnets and it lasts 99 years, you have a nice raw element for energy production. And so this comes from his new concept of the universe. And this is, I thought, was very insightful. It said free hydrogen is a logical supply because it's the basis of the 4 space octaves. So the entire population of 10 planets like ours will not lessen its total because nature balances the withdrawals of the gases. But then he goes on to say that nature, it's harder for nature to replace the withdrawal of the solids like coal or oil because that takes millions of years. But if you could harness hydrogen from the space octaves, it's nature replenishes it. if you could advance it one for me. And this is just a close-up of the space octaves. And of course, modern science still does not know of the first, second, and third octaves. They start at deuterium and tritium, which is ethlogen and bbgen, and then hydrogen. So these are, again, Walter Russell said you have to understand not just matter, but space. And so this is what he details in this book. This is one of my favorite books on Walter Russell's science. And then this is where he also gives better hints at how to extract hydrogen from the atmosphere. All right, thank you.
Go back. Ask for more.